Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Maybe you are accessing this material, whatever program in week 3. And if you are accessing this material on YouTube.com, so you can as well visit coolchat.com. So you can just copy and paste and make modification to the text. So you don't have to repeat the text again. So if you ask Coolchat, sees the source code and also the more information as well, because the video made based on the content of the text that we have on the website. And if you haven't subscribed yet, remember to subscribe, and as well invite your friends to enjoy this. You click on courses, we have information this of accessing this material. These are week 3, so that you can install the necessary ID to get the foundation before you take this course. And that you won't understand I'll be teaching today, because it's a continuation of the previous weeks. So Java programming. Then if you go to the home page, you will contact an instructor. So you need to create an account as well as login for you to be able to chat with an instructor. You come to login already, it will be chat with an instructor. So if you haven't logged in or you don't have an account, you create an account. So once you get to the home page of this course, you chat with an instructor. So when you click on it, then you can send me a chat message. I can see it and reply you. So if you are getting an error, you can just take a screenshot of your error and add a message to it in the chat message. So when I read, then I can also give you a reply. Okay, so we are on week 3. So what are we going to do for week 3? So week 3, basically we'll be learning to create classes. So we will learn to create classes. Then we can, first of all, we'll learn how to create methods. Then in the methods, you need to know methods, because we have methods in classes. So after you learning about methods, then we will also see the methods in our classes. Then we will also learn how you can create objects from the class you've created, and now you can access the methods of the object. Then we will also learn about constructors. If you are learning classes, or if somebody says constructor, what does it mean? We will learn about that. Okay, then in the classes we have what we call access modifiers. So we will also learn about the access modifiers as well. So welcome to week 3. So we click on the study the graduation curve for you to have access to. And please, while you are following the course, we practice. So you put the code in your Eclipse or whatever ID you are using. Then you can also modify the code so that you can be practicing. So you play with the code, you make changes, you see the effect for you to master the programming concept. Okay, so a method is a program model that contains a series of statements that carry out a task. So normally we the programmers will write what our method should do. So based on what you want the method to accomplish, you write your code. For example, if I want to write a method to display welcome to Java programming, okay, so I will write my code so that whenever this method is being called anywhere, it will just display welcome to Java programming. So in our week 1 and 2, we saw how you write a syntax to do a test on the screen using the console application. How you write a test to this, how to write the syntax to display a test on the screen. So you can use that concept. Then after learning about how you write methods, you can create a method so that it will just display welcome to Java programming. So that's basically about methods. So method is also a function. the difference between a method and a function is that methods are used in a class. So a function in a class are called methods. So that's the difference. Those are functions. Just if we've learned about functions in other programming languages, methods are also functions. Just that if you call a function, you write a function in a method in the class, it becomes a method. So functions in classes are referred to as methods. So these are the skeleton of a method. So a method, we have the method header. So a method header provides information about how others can interact with it. A method header, then we have a method body. So body is between a pair of curly braces. Okay, so the method header is the first one you call. Then after that you have your curly bracket. So your curly braces are the method body, where you put your code to implement the method you want to use. Then okay, so an empty method is called a stub. An optional access specifier. So you can also specify the access specifier. So in programming, we have what you call encapsulation, hiding certain parts of your variables, your methods, or your classes. So we qualify it with certain keywords that will make it either to be denied from other packages or other packages using your variables or methods or your class. So we qualify them. So those qualifications is what we call access specifier. So you can make it either public, private, protected, or default. If you don't specify any of these three, it becomes default. So based on each of the qualification you give to it, and also gives the right whether it should be accessed by any other package or classes or not. So for public, it means anyone can access those variables or methods in the class. For private, you can only access them in the class. Any other class cannot access it. Any other package cannot access it. Then for protected, you can access it in the class. You can as well access it in the package. You can as well access it from sub classes. So any other sub classes that you create, the protected, you can as well access them. These are the private only in the class. You can't access it in the other packages, or other classes cannot access it because it is private. So you can only have it in the class. For default, if you don't have any of these access specifiers, by default it will be seen as only accessible in the package. So if you don't specify whether a method is a public or protected, then it will only be accessible in the package. If you are using any other package, you cannot access it. Now I've mentioned package because I believe you know what a package is. In our previous weeks, we've been creating in the week 1 we learned about how to create a package in a class. In our example, our first program that we did, and in the week 2 we've created a number of packages as well, and we put classes in them. So in a layman English, a package is a folder where you put classes inside. So you know that, oh, this kind of class, if you are looking for a particular class, then you know that kind of folder or package to go and you'll be looking for that class. So it's just like a folder we have where we put in classes. So in Eclipse or any other environment, you can create a package which is like a folder. Then inside the packages, you can be creating classes inside them. So that's what I meant if I say package. So if we have something like protected, so in the protected, other classes can have access to them, and you can only have it in the main class. For default, you can access it both in the package and in the class itself, but you cannot access it outside the package. So if you don't specify any access specifier, if you don't write public, private, or protected, then you should know that both your classes, your variables, and the methods can only be used within the package. The package, you get a not visible error. which we will demonstrate in our last session of this content. So as I have explained, so this is just to encapsulate your code so that it protects part of your code. Then we have types of access modifiers. So I've explained default. So for default, if you don't specify any of these three, then that is a default access specifier. So in that one, you can only access it within the package. So outside the package, you can't have access to it. Then we have the public. So public is like a free agent. Anywhere you can call it, whether in the class itself, whether in another class, whether in the package itself or outside the package, anywhere you can call the public lesson. So most often, variables and methods are referred to as public. That's if you don't want them to be protected. Other than that, if you want to protect certain aspects of your class or variables, then you can use either the protected or the private. Now, what's the difference between the private and the protected? So for private protected, it is within the package. So the protected access level access scope, that is within the package. Then outside within the package, if it's outside the package, it's only through classes that inherited that class. So if you inherit that class, or you can still access the protected variables or methods if you inherited that class, or you have you create object of that class. So during the creation of the object of that class, you inherit every property, which include the protected variables as well. So with them you can have it, but if the class is not it does not relate to the other classes, then you cannot have access to the variables which are declared as protected. So for private, you can only access them within the class. So if you declare the variable and you add a private keyword to it, for example, if I'm declaring an integer and I write private int a, then I can only access my a variable in that class. I can't access it outside the class. Even if it's within the package, I can still not access it because I've declared it as private. So private variables or methods. So if I declare a method, which we will later come to see how you write the method. For example, if I'm writing a method called sum, if I declare it out, let's say private int sum, then I should know that my method sum can only be accessed in that class. Outside that class, I can't have access to that class, to that methods, because I've declared it as what? Private. So that's it. So in the tabular form, these are the differences. For private, you can access it only within the class. Any other part, no. So only the class. So you can see inside the class, yes. Inside package, no. If another class is accessing it in the same package, no. If another class is accessing outside the package, no. If another class is accessing outside the package in the subclass, if even it's in the subclass, still no. Outside, no. And the default is only accessible within the package. So we have in the class, yes. Inside the package, yes. Outside the package, no. Outside the package of another subclass, no. Okay, so then protected. So protected inside the class itself, yes. Inside the package itself, yes. Outside package in subclass, yes. So the difference between the default and the protected is that for protected, you can, if you inherit that class, if you have a subclass, you can still have access to those protected variables or methods. But for default, you cannot do that. Default, you can only use within the package. Later on, we'll see practical examples of them, which you also create your project and you can see it yourself. Now for public, as I've said, free agent. So anywhere you can have access to it. So we will demonstrate this one with a code later on in this week lesson. Okay. So in addition, like main, any method that can be used without instantiating an object requires a keyword modifier static. Okay, so if you are writing a method in a class, that you don't have to Okay, so if you are using writing a method in the and you'll be calling the method in itself inside by itself, then you need to qualify it by static. So static, we don't create object of that class before we can use the method. So for example, if I write a method, a class called main, and the public static void main, I want to call that methods inside that same class. I need to qualify them with static, because I will not create objects of that class we are in. Okay, we create only objects if you are referring with another class, will be accessing those methods, and we create objects. But if the methods are within that class, we don't need to create objects of them. So now then you need to qualify them by static. Okay, so if it will be accessed by another classes and the rest, then you don't need the static keyword. But if you be accessing them in the public static void main in the same class, then you need to qualify them with the static qualification. Okay, so how do we write a method? So we have the access identifier, whether it is public, whether it is private, whether it is protected. If it is not, if you don't specify anything, then it means you are making a default. So the default rule of accessing it will be applied. Then we have to indicate the type of data type that is going to be. If it's not return any value, then it's going to be void, because it's not going to return anything. But if it's going to return an integer value, then it should be int. If it's going to return a double variable or value, then it's going to be double. If it's going to return float value, then it's going to be float. If it's going to return maybe char, then it's going to be char. So based on the data type that you'll be returning after you process your method, and then that will be your identification here. Okay, then you have the method name. So naming methods are similar to the way we name variables. They are applied with the same rule. You can't have space in them. You can't begin with an integer and so on. So you apply the same rule. Now in many programming languages, if you are having multiple words, then some they decide to use the first word the first letter of the first word lowercase, and the second one the first letter begins with a capital letter, so that it varies. The person can figure out the word, so the person can read it. So, and some may also use an underscore to separate them. So based on how you decide to name your methods, it's up to you. But it follows the same rules of naming variables that we've done in our previous weeks. So if the method will return a process result, to process something, return the result, then you have your return keyword here, and the value it will be returning, then you will have it over here. Then if the method is not returning anything, the data type is supposed to be void. So here is going to be void, then the method name. Then if a method will take in some input data, you have to pass in a data to, and that data will process in the method. Then you need to put the data types of those input variables here. So we call them argument or parameters, or however you call it. So the input, when you are calling the method, the values you need to pass to your method, which will be processed over here. You specify their data types, so you declare them over here. If it's more than one, you separate them by commas. So if it's more than one, you separate them by commas with their data type and their name over here. So we call them parameters or arguments. So this is an example. If you have public, so the public is the access modifier. So public main can be accessed anywhere, whether in the same class, whether outside the class, whether in the same package or outside the package. It can be accessed anywhere. Then we have a data type here, which means that the result that will return over here, this is int. So the result that will return over here should also be int. Then the name of our method is sum. Then these are the parameters. So this, like I told you, the input variables, you need to declare them. So we can have int a, then int b over here. So in the int a, int b, so this will take in a value and b value, then it will sum the two, then the result it will return it. Okay, so based on the type of result which we are going to return and the type of data type you write here, these two are int values. So if you join them, the result will also be int. So you have to qualify it over here that it's int, because it will be expecting an integer value. Now you need to indicate the data type, because it will reserve a space for the value. So you need to qualify it with the data type so that it knows how much space to reserve to store that value inside. So if we are going to, like I explained, if you are going to access those methods in our class itself, then we need to qualify it with static, because we don't need to create an object before we can access those methods. So we need to qualify them by static. So it's the same thing. So we just add a static before our data type. So you have public, then static. Okay, so placing a method in a class. So if you are placing a method in the class, we know we have the public static void main over here. Okay, so outside this public static void main, you can have your methods over there. So you can place it here, you can as well place it over here, and you only call you can call them here. So we later calling the function or invoking a method, calling a method, invoking a method. So you write your methods outside, so over here or there, that's where you write your methods, and you call them inside your public static void main. And remember, if you are writing your methods here and you be calling them here, then they need to be static, because you will not be creating objects of this class to call it in itself. So you need to qualify them by static before you can be able to call them. So you have invoking a method. Invoking a method is just calling the method. So if you want to use a method, that the process is called invoking the method. So if you want to use a method, it's just a method name and the two brackets. So the method name and the two brackets. So in the two brackets, it can be empty or there can be something inside. If your methods take in some variables, then you have to pass in the variables over there. For example, in our sum methods, it takes in two values. So if we call the sum method, it means you have to pass in two values. If we call it and we pass only one, you get a syntax error because it will be expecting two. So if you call it and you pass in different variable data types too, it will give error because it's expecting the first one to be an integer and the second one to be an integer value. Okay, so this is a practical example. So we have int a, then we assign a value to it, so 2. Int b, we assign a value to it, 3. Then int c, we just declare it. Now, if we want the sum of 2 and 3 to be stored in our C, we can call our method which does a summation. So we have our C is equal to, so this method will be invoked or called. So that's a method name. Then the method, it takes two integer values. So the value of A will pass here and the value of B will pass here. So here will be 2 and here will be 3. So if you go back to the function, it says add A and B. So it's going to add your 2 and your 3. It says add A and B. Our A is 2 and our B is 3. So it will just add 2 plus 3. Then it will return 5. So that's it. Then we also know that equal to means assignment. So the result it will return, because that function returns a result. So the result it will return, it will be stored in our memory for our C. So C will have a value of the result that this function is going to return. So you have a demonstration. So it says add a class. So you create a project. So you create a project, then you add a class by name mathematics. So in it you include in the public static void main. You should take that it should include a public static void main, so that your class will have a public static void main. Now once you take, then you write the following methods. So you write a method to greet display welcome to Java programming. Then we write a method to add two numbers. Then we write a method to add and multiply two numbers. Then we write a method to take a number, then return the square of the number. Then we'll add two numbers that return takes the radius of a circle and returns the circumference of that circle. So you will create a new project. So new project. So Java project. So in our Java project, we will call it maybe week 3. Okay, so all our other code we will put them here. So we create week 3. Don't want to add any model, yes. So in your week 3, you can create the class. So if I want to create a package for the class, I can create. I click on the resources. So the resources is where your packages and your classes go. So I can create a new package where, like I told you, a package is like a folder. So I can call it main. So I'll put my main class inside. So I can call it main. Then click on finish. So in this package, I'll create a class. I'll call the main. Then remember, it says that you should tick the public static so that it includes the public static in your class. So in this package, I'm creating a new class. So class, then I can call my class main. Then if you want the public static void main, you take it, and we'll be using the public static void because we'll be running the code within the class itself. So we need the public static void main over here. Then you click on finish. Okay, so that is your public static void main class. So in the work we are asked to do, we are asked to write a function to read. Like it was said, you can put a function, a method there, and that's really where you write it. So for demonstrating sake, I will put some methods over at the top and the others are below it, so that you know that you can place them outside your main method. Your main method, you can put classes and the methods outside them. So this is even a method itself. You can see void is a method itself. But that is a main. So whenever we run our code, that's where it starts from. So any other method, we call them in the main, because this part of the code is where it's being run first before the itself calling your other method. So now I'm going to write the greet. The greet method does not return anything, so it's going to be void. And if I want it to be accessed by any other person, I'll use public. So most methods are public unless you want to hide it, because you can add those private and protected. So public static, then I'll have to add a static keyword, because I'll not be creating objects. In the subsequent we'll see what object mean. When you have you create a class, you can create object of it, then you can call the methods. So since I'll be calling the method in the class itself, I need to qualify it with static. Even if you don't qualify it, when you are calling it over here, it will tell you that you are calling a method in a static method, so it will an error. Okay, so public static, then you have welcome, a void, so you can qualify the data type. So this is a void because it will not return anything. So we have welcome. Okay, so it doesn't take anything, but I want to modify it a little bit. You can take it as, let's say, it takes the name of the person. Okay, so let's say string name. Okay, so in this case, so it means that in the example we will take the result from the user. So we take the result from the user. So we'll have in our, if since it is void, we can just write our display over here. So system dot out dot. Now remember, in you control the backspace. So when you press control backspace, it will give you possible options you can use. Then you can choose if the option is correct, and it just play. Okay, so here I can just write name, the name of the person. So what will enter, then class, then I can write welcome to Java programming. Okay, this example, in this example, the input is string. So before you call that method, you need to pass in your string variable, the value of it, before you call it. So you need to call it welcome, then into brackets, then you pass in a string value there. And that you get an error because it says you should pass in something. Now if this space is empty, then you don't need to pass in anything. But if the function takes in an input, then you need to pass that variable at the top, so that it knows that when when someone is calling this method, it needs to pass in that value. Okay, so now I can write the other ones over here. So if you want to call this method, then you can write our, so you can have string, okay, name. Okay, now to make it more fancier, you can take the name from the user, then so whatever the user will enter, then you display it. But I'm going to do it this way, so that because we've done it in week 2, I want you to do it and try to get it. So here I'm going to set the name myself. So Joseph, let's say Mama. Okay, so to call the method, I'll just write welcome, then I'll pass the string variable, so it says name. Okay, now demonstrate that it is, since you are not creating objects of of your this main class, and you are calling the method, you need the static. If I take this static off, let's see if we get an error. Okay, see, it gave me an error, and let's put our this, and it say cannot make a static reference to a non-static method welcome. Okay, so you can see that it's making a static reference to it. Even name, there is a static here, so you need to qualify if the static, because we didn't create objects before we start calling this method. In the previous one, when we learned about class and creating object and calling the method, you see that we don't need static qualification, but with this one we need a static, because we don't create any objects, we are calling it in a static method. Okay, so you can save this one, then you run it, then you can try the other one. Okay, so you can see, so welcome to Java programming. So modify it by taking the input from the user. Okay, so so you can pause the video. So once you finish it, then let me know. You remember last time we learned about how to take input from the user, so I want you to apply that knowledge. So pause the video, then you add it. So you import the necessary package that you need for the taking input. Then you create object of that class. Then you take the value from the user. So instead of coding the name over here, take the name from the user. Then you pass the name to your function to display the welcome message. Okay, so do it. You have let's say 2 minutes. So I believe you were able to do that. Okay, so to take input from the user, like we learned last week, you need to write import then java.util.scanner. Okay, so this will import the scanner class, so you can create object of it. So in that case, if we need it, so here instead of getting the value, we can create an object we can call scanner in is equal to new scanner, and we know our scanner takes in our system.in as the input. Okay, and this is our scanner object. So we can have our string name. Okay, then we can get the value of user straight. So we declare, then we get a value. So since it's a string, we need to call the next line method. Okay, so when it gets the value, it will assign the value that we get from the user over here. Then the name, we pass in the value in our method. So let's try this, and I believe it because I asked you to pause the video and do it, so you should be able to do that. So let's run. But first of all, I tell the user to enter something. The user will not know that he needs to enter something. So you let me type, but we modify our code. So because we need to tell the user that he needs to enter something. So you can say you have been assured, welcome to Java programming. So we need to tell the user that to get a value. So we need to qualify system.out.println. Please enter your name. Okay, so this is better. So this one asks the user to enter the name. So if we run, we have something like, okay, so please, so user knows that he needs to enter his name. So Kofi AJ. Okay, so when you press enter, so Kofi AJ, welcome to Java. Okay, so that is it. So we create another method. We will say fun, just to display Java programming is fun, because I want to show you a method that we don't have anything in the as an input to demonstrate this way. So we can have public static void, maybe you can say fun. Okay, so we just display system.out. So Java programming is fun. Okay, so I can call this fun over here to invoke that method. Okay, so if I call it here, so first this method will be called. So when we get the input from the user, it comes here. So it's the name, so it will display this. So if we want to make it maybe small letters to Java program, so that it looks a little bit italics before the user will enter, because the user may enter lower cases and the rest. Okay, so let's even the Java. Okay, but I can leave the Java in capital blocks. So let's run this. So it will execute the name the user will enter. Welcome to Java programming. Then the next line we call fun. Fun does not take any input, so it will just display Java programming is fun. So we run it. So your name, Mary Google. Okay. So as you can, Mary Google, welcome to Java programming. Java programming is fun. So this is an example that doesn't take in any input. So if there is that the function, the method doesn't take any input, it's going to be empty. If the method doesn't return anything, it's going to be void. So you make it void. Okay, so let's come to the actual examples we are supposed to do on the side. So I think one of them was we've done the display method. These are always is a little bit different because we are taking the input from the user, but it's the same concept. So we'll do the one that says adding number, then multiplying a number. So let's say public adding a number, because the number can be decimals, we can make it double. So public static double sum. Okay, so here you can make the variable data type should be double, so you can add decimal input as well. And okay, so our double A double B. Okay, so here we said double, so it's supposed to return a double result, so we can write return A plus B. Here is supposed to be. Okay, so that's it. So if we want to call it, we can assign values to them. So we can have double A, let's say 4. Okay, we can as well write all at once. So double, so B can be, let's say 6. Okay, so now then we can call one C, which will call this function. So C will be equal to sum, then we pass our A and our B to it. Okay, now we can display the result. So we can have system.out.plain. Okay, so we can have A is the value of our A, then a string for the class. So class, then we join the value of our B, okay, then a string for our equal to sign, then we join it with our result, which is stored in our. So this one will be here our A is 4, so we have 4, our B is 6, so 4 plus 6, and the result will be 10, so 4 plus 6 is equal to 10. Okay, so that's for the addition. So we will save them. Okay, so go then nation. Okay, so validation, welcome to Java programming. Java programming is fun. So 4 plus 6 is equal to 10. Okay, so that's for the summation. So we do another method for multiplication. You can call it multiply or something. So public static double multiply. It takes in 2 double values and returns the product of them. So return A times B. I mean, you know that multiplication in programming is what star. So you have A star B. Then we can as well, here we can call our C to be equal to multiply. So here we are multiplying A and B. Okay, so if we print it out, we can copy and paste this one here. So we have A times, so here we change it to X. So it becomes A times B is equal to our C value. Okay. Now we can comment this part of the code since we finish using it. So we can consider it doesn't always be asking of our name and stuff. Okay, so we can comment this. Then we can delete because we are no longer using it. Okay. So in this example, it will multiply the two numbers. So then when we call it, let's assign the value to C. So we call it, so we can just run this code. Okay, so as you can see, you have 4 plus 6 is equal to 10, and 4 times 6 is equal to 24. Okay, so what was the next one? So next we should the function to take the loss, then returns the circumference. Okay, so public double static double circumference, which takes in our radius. Our radius can be double value, so double radius can be in decimal. Okay. Now, what is the formula for circumference of a circle? Right, it is 2 times the radius and times pi. So we need to declare a constant for pi. Other than that, we can also write it and code it. But in the actual production, we need to declare a constant of pi. So last time we saw how to declare a constant value. Okay, so we use the final to qualify that value or that variable is a constant, and if that variable will be used in the static method, you need to qualify with the static. Okay, so let's declare our pi to be a constant. So we can declare it. Now, if you want for constants, we need to declare them. If we were using them in a method, we need to declare them as global variable, which means outside the methods. So we can declare it over here, outside our method. So we have final static, okay, then it's of the type double. Okay, so we can have pi. And constants are normally written, even though you can write your own variable name, but it's recommended to write constants in capital letters. So I can send a value. So 3.142. Okay, so that's our constant. So the final keyword is to make sure that it is a constant. So this value does not change. So later on in your code, if you go and write 3.14 for pi, you write pi is equal to 3.14, you get a syntax error because it's constant, it's not supposed to change. Now you have to qualify it with static because we're using a static method, and that will get an error. Then we know it's a double data type, you need to qualify it with a double. Now we call the name pi with capital letters because it's recommended that constant should be written in capital letters so that when you are using it, it's knows if someone is reading your code, the person knows that this is a constant. So we are going to return our circumference. We know our 2 is 2 times, so 2 times our radius, or 2 pi r, so 2 times our pi. We can have pi times our radius. Of course, multiplication doesn't bother the order, so you can put it in any order, but there's 2 times your pi times your radius. Okay, so if we have so if you want to write it in such a way that the user will enter, then we can do this one over here. So we can move. So we declare our scanner class, then we'll tell the user to enter the radius. So here, please enter the radius of the circle. The radius of the circle. Okay. Then you have to take it from the user. So we declare it's supposed to be double. So double radius is equal to, so we get it from the user. So in the object for our scanner, it is a double value. The method should be next double. Next double. Since it's a double, so we call our next double. Okay, so now I want to also show you something. Now if you are going to use a value later on, you can call your method directly. For example, here in the modification, we store it in C. In the situation where we just want to display the result, then we don't need to store it in C. We can just call our function directly to display the result. So in this example, I'm not going to store my circumference value in any variable. I'm not going to declare a variable for it to store it. I will call the method directly, which will return the calculated circumference in my display. So here I'm going to write system.out.println. Okay, so here the circumference of a circle of radius. Okay, so I in the radius here, so I join the value of my radius, so plus radius. Now remember, last time one student sent me a message with a screen of getting an error. Then what the student was doing is that he was putting the plus in the double quotation. Now remember, whatever you put in these double quotations are string. So if you put this plus here in this string, it is a text, so it will be displayed on the screen. It's not going to be part of your syntax code. So remember, this plus is outside your quotation because it's joining. So when you are joining the string, you use plus. When we are adding, we use plus, just like you know. So to join the string, so we are joining the value of our radius to this string, which is so that it will be the circumference of a circle of radius, then the value will join to it. So if your radius is 5, then 5 will be here. Then we will continue with is. So we want a space to be after the value of the radius. So we left as you have to press the space bar. Then you enter is. Then the circumference too, we want a space to be there. So we leave the space there. So we leave a space, another space. Then we call our circle here. Like I told you, I'm not going to assign the value to the circumference result into a value. I'm not going to store it on the memory. I'm just going to call it, and the result will be displayed automatically. So here I can call my circumference. So I call it circumference. Okay. Then I can pass in my value, which is the radius of the user. Okay. And that was it. So I just close my semicolon. So it will call this method and pass in your radius. It will return the result. So the result value is when your string. Okay, so let's run this code. Okay, so let's enter. Circumference is 4. Minus radius of the circle is 4. So we have the circumference of a circle of radius 4 is 25.136. So 2 times 3.142 times 4. It is this. So that is it for the circumference. Then what other method were we supposed to? So we are supposed to display, so add two numbers and return the result. We've done that. Multiply two numbers and return the result. We've done that. Okay, so we are left the square of a number. So takes a number and return the square of the number. Okay, so we create a method, we call it square. Okay, so our square. So you remember, square is just a multiplication of the number by itself. So we have public static square. Okay, it takes in the number, so we can make it double. If you make it int, then decimal numbers cannot be square. So you need to make it double. So double a. Okay, so our return is just going to be the multiplication of the number itself. So return a times a. Okay, that will be the square of that value. Okay, so public static double square. Okay, now we can call it. So we can write, tell the user to enter a number to square it. So enter a number to square. Please enter a number to square. Square. Okay, then we can get the value. So we can call it number. So here we call it number. Okay, so we get the number from the user. Okay, now we display our results. So system dot out dot println. Okay, so the square of then the number count. So we join the number. So the value stored in the number memory is, then we call our square function. So we have our square, which takes in the double of the number you want to square. So number. Then you finish your system display. Okay, so now let's run it. Okay, so enter the radius of the so if I enter 5. Okay, so that's the result. Then enter a number to square. So if I want the square root of 3.5, okay, so the square of 3.5 is 12.25. So if you multiply 3.5 by itself, this is what you are going to get. Okay, so let's continue. So let's see if we've done everything. So this one may be different because I'm not looking at the ones we have in the slide. So in the slide, we have the welcome, which is like this. It didn't take any value for a name from the user. Then we have the name of our method to be product for the modification product. Then we have our square. And in our example, we are using int as a data type because we are passing only int values. But if you want to accept more numbers, then you need to call them by. You need to declare the data types as double so that it can accept double data types as well. Okay, so now we are done with methods. Now we are going to see how you declare an object of a method. Okay, so all these methods we have is in this mathematics class. Okay, so if we want to create object in another, if we want to create object in another class. Okay, in my example, I did everything in the main. Okay, so if I want to create objects in another class, then I will create another class called mathematics, where I will put in the functions that we wrote. Okay, then we will call those. We will do an example here. Then of course, here it use an employee, and we can also use an employee. So we can use two things at the same time to demonstrate the concept. Okay, so I'm going to write another class. I'm going to add another class. I'll call it mathematics, where I'll put in these methods I have. Okay, so add class, and that one I'm not going to include the public static because the public static in that class. So mathematics. Okay, we don't need the public static. The public static will be in the main. We only create object this class. So in the main, I will copy the classes. Remember, since I'll be creating objects of their class, of the mathematics class, I don't need to call the methods. I don't need objects of that class before I can access methods. So later on, I'll show you how you create objects. But you already know how to create objects because we were creating objects of the scanner class. So by now, you should know how to create objects. Okay, so this class. So let me teach you the object. You don't need the static. You don't need the static anymore here because you are not going to call them static. We will create objects of this class before the static. Okay, so I'll show you how we create objects of a class, then we call the methods of that object. Then I will copy this code and we'll use it in our main. So now I can delete the other methods I have in my main class because we'll create objects over here and call the class of the mathematics. So that will be fine. So we can have this place to be empty. Okay. So in our main, so we don't need this one anymore. Okay, maybe we will need it when we decide to get the value before we call the method. Okay. So now let's continue. So to create objects of a class, as we saw in the scanner example, when we were taking input from the user, when we imported the scanner class. Now, when we were creating the object, I explained to you that it's supposed to be the name of the class. So the name of your class will be here. Then you give the object a name. So whatever name you give to the object to the programmer is up to you. Then you have equal to. Then the keyword for creating the object is new. Then the class name again. Okay. Now in the brackets, it depends on whether the class takes in an input or not. We call them constructors. We will see it later on in this week's lesson. They are called constructors. So if the class takes in some input or argument, then you pass it over here. But if the class doesn't, it's just going to be empty, two empty brackets. Okay, so that's how we create object. So in our mathematics class that we've created, if you want to create object called mass or something, then the class name is mathematics. So mathematics is supposed to come here. Then if I give it an object name mass, then mass is equal to new, then the same class name will be here. So we have mathematics over here. Then we close it with the semicolon. Okay, now to get the methods of that class, of the object we've created, is just the object name, then dot. So just the object name, then dot. So after the dot, you just mention the method that you want to access from that class. So normally when you put the dot after the object name, the options of the class for that object shows up, just like you saw for the scanner object. You can see something like next double, next int, next float, next line, and the rest. So once you create the object and you put dot there, they give you the suggestion of all the possible variables and the methods you can use from that object. Okay, so now let's demonstrate this over here in our. So I'm going to copy this one here, and this method mathematics class doesn't have any static. Okay, it doesn't have static main. Now we don't need static because we are not going to call the methods over here in the same class, we are going to create objects of that class and call the methods there. So we don't need a static here. Okay, so now we can have this. Okay, so here I'm going to delete these ones. So we go step by step. Okay, so let me go over again. Now we have class, which this one you already know. We did an examples of the class in the main class, and we created a new class and we call it mathematics. So this mathematics class has a list of methods like welcome. So maybe you want to welcome the person to the Java programming, okay, or maybe in the math class. So you can also say maybe math class. So welcome to math for beginners. So mathematics for beginners. Mathematics for beginners. Okay. So these methods welcome the student to the math class. Okay. Then here will be mathematics is fun. So here we have mathematics is fun. Okay. So let's say you've created this class for mathematics. So you have a list of methods, and any programmer who wants to use your class can call, or you yourself, based on the program you are writing that you need them in your coding. Then you write the list of functions. So here you want to greet the person. So the person will ask the person's name. Then when we get it to the mathematics course, then we just say mathematics is fun. Okay. Now we will ask the user to enter maybe a first number and a second number. Then we will call any of these methods. Then we will ask the user to enter the radius of the circle. Then we call any of this method. Then the number to square. Then we call this method. Okay. Now remember, we are not calling this method in this class. So if another class is going to call it, that class have to create objects of that class. So if you are calling it a different class, you need to create object of that class. And from the code it says, so we are calling our math classes over here in our math methods. We are calling in our main class. Okay, so, like you see, say public class main. So these are public our main class. So in our main class, we are calling the methods we have in our mathematics class. So to call these methods before they can be accessible in other classes, you need to create objects of that class you want to access it method. Now the rule says that to create objects is the name of the class, and the name of our class is mathematics. So you have mathematics. Then you, the programmer, you give the name to the object. You can call it A, you can call it B, you can call it C, you can call it A, B, you can call it A, D, you can call it A, E, F, and the rest. But remember, like I've advised you in our beginning, I think week 1 or week 2, that when you are naming any variable or any object or any class, it will connote or it should reflect the type of class or the type of variable or whatever it's about. Okay, so here it will be advisable that we call it mass or something that relates to mass. So here my object, I'm going to call it mass. Then it's equal to the new. Okay, then we have mathematics. Okay, now in this our mathematics class, it doesn't take in any input. It doesn't take any input. It doesn't have any constructor. So it's going to be empty bracket. Okay, then we close it. Okay, now if your class is in a different package, then your Eclipse, I don't know about the other IDE, but Eclipse, if it's in a different package, now you can see that our mouse and our main is in the same package. Okay, so here we don't need to import anything. Okay, but if it's in a different package, then you need to import that class. But since it's in the same package, we don't need to import that class. So we just create we have the name of the class, then the object name is equal to new, then the class name. Okay, if this class you are using is from a different package, you will get an error here. Then when you click on it, it will ask you to import that class. So when you click on it, it will automatically import the class. Okay, so now if we want to call any of our methods, then we can just call the object dot. You set all the methods we've created. So all the methods we've created for our mass class are here. So we have the circumference, we can call it, we have the fan, we have the multiply, then we have the square, then we have the sum, then we have the welcome. Okay, so we have the welcome. So all those methods we have in our class are available, we can call them. Okay, so let's do them step by step. Now our welcome takes in, as you can see, our welcome method, it takes in a string which is a name. So let's get the name from the user before we call this method. So we can tell to enter. So system dot out dot print length. Please enter your name. Okay, now once we've done that, we need to take in the name. So you can declare a variable we can call a string name is equal to, now because we are taking input from the user, we need to use a scanner object. So in the name of my scanner object, I'll name it in. So in is equal to, then it's a string. So next line, and okay, so this takes in the user name. So if I want to greet this person, I'll call my mass object. So mass object dot, now the method I want in that class is welcome. Okay, so I call the welcome, then I can pass in my name value. Okay, then I save it. So now if I run this, it will be please enter your name. Then it will execute the welcome method which is found in the mass class, and we are calling that method on the objects that we've created. So let's run it and see. Okay, so please enter your name. So Godwin Ashon. Okay, so Godwin Ashon, welcome to Mathematics for Beginners. Okay, so as you can see, we wanted to use welcome here, but we don't have to create the method over here. So we only have one class which has those methods, so we can use them as many as we want. So that's why we call object oriented is code reusable. So when you have your code, you can use it as many as you want. You just create object of that class, then you can use all the methods you listed in that class. Now, why is object oriented also important? What is a practical example? So for the practical example, I will give you an example. Let me start it, and let's say if I can use some illustration for you. So if in case you're writing a game, for example, where the user will be scrolling a paddle, and the idea of the game is that there will be raindrops or stones dropping from the top. So the user has to escape those drops. So they will be moving either the top, the down, the left or right arrow. So whilst the stones are coming from the top, the user have to be using the left or right arrow to be dodging it, to be escaping from them. Now let's assume if you are writing such a game. Now you don't need to, if you use thousands of circular stones, you don't need to create thousands of circular stones, thousands of them at different directions. You need to create one class that will have the position, the x and y position of your drops. So you can create thousands of objects from that one class that you've created. So each of the drops that will be following, that will be dropping in your game, will just be an object of the class that you've created. So in the game, let's say for example, if I have so in the game there can be a drop like this. drop, and another can drop over here, then another can drop from here, then another can drop from there. Okay, so this two-dimensional lesson, yes, it has x and y. So the user, there will be a paddle over here that the user will use the left and right key. Okay, so the user will be if the user click on the right key, the paddle will move to this direction. If the user clicks the right key, the left key, the paddle will move to this direction. And each of these balls have their x and y coordinates. Okay, so where they are supposed to display on the screen, you have to indicate their x. So here is the y coordinates and the x coordinates. So each of these balls will have their x and y coordinates. Okay, so if you need thousands of them, do you have to write a code for each of the thousands? No, you need to write one class that will have the x position of the ball. So that class will have the x position of the ball. You need to have that class which will have the y position of the ball. Okay, then maybe so basically this will be the things that you need. So you when you create the object, you set the x and y coordinate. Most often you may generate random values to set this x and y coordinate. Okay, so if your x is this value, your x and y are this value, then the ball will be ordered to position over here. Then the object that you create, its x and y value to it will be positioned over there. Then the object that you create, its x and y position will be positioned over here. The object that you create, its and y position will be positioned over here. So all that the user will do is to paddle it. Okay, now in your coding, what you need to do is to check if there is a collision. So in the collision detection, you write a code to detect for collision. So in the collision detection, you check the current position of your x and the paddle. So if in the bundle where you see that they are in the same bundle, then you can see that they collided. Then this person can lose a point because your ball has collided with the paddle. Okay, so that is the advantage of object-oriented programming. You create one class, then you can use the methods in that class as many as you want. All that you need to do is create objects of that class, then you can call it methods. Okay, so in this example, if you need thousands of them, just one class, you can create thousands of objects from that class. So you don't need to write classes code for each of the balls. No. So that's one beauty about the object-oriented programming. Okay, so now we continue. So now we ask the user which of the methods we want to use here, the addition and the modification. So we ask the user to enter number 1, enter a number, then we take it. Then we ask the user to enter another number, then we take the value, then we call our sum, we call our multiplication on it. So let's display. Okay, so enter a number, please enter a number. Okay, so the number is going to be double. So here we have double. Okay, so here number, or let's say number 1. Okay, this is a double. Our method should next double. Okay, then we ask the user to enter a second number. Okay, so the second number will be number 2. So enter a second number, or enter another number. Okay, then we get it. Okay, so we can call our addition and our multiplication on the object of methods on the mass object, because it has those methods in the mass class. We have those methods. Okay, so we can call them using the object's name. Okay, so here I can display that system dot out dot println. Okay, so we can have our num1 So we have num1. Okay, then we join the string for the plus. So plus. Okay, then with the value of our num2. Then the next will be string is equal to. Okay, then now we can call our method, which we can declare a value and store it there, but like I've explained, we will not use that value for anything, so we can call it directly. So we can call it mass. So the object name, then dot the name of the method you want to use. This time you want to use plus summation, so sum. Then we pass in our num1 value and our num2 value. Okay, then we'll have that. Then we need to close our system, the last bracket of our system. Okay, so that's it. So this, if your user enters 2.5, so you have 2.5, if you 3.5, you have 2.5 plus 3.5 is equal to. So when we call this method, it will do the addition, then the result will be displayed over there. Okay, so let's run this code. So if you run it, so enter your name. So my name is Walimasho. Okay. Okay, so it says I should enter a number. So let's say I enter 2.5. So I should enter another number. Let's say I enter 3.8. Okay. Now it says 2.5 plus 3.8 is equal to 6.3. Is it correct? So I think computers don't lie, so it will be correct. So that's it. So you can call the methods of that class by first of all creating the object of that class. Then all the methods will be available so far as is following the access specifiers rule. So later on we'll see an example, public, private, and the rest. So if the methods are hidden from other classes, then it will give you an error if you are calling those methods. But other than that, if it's public, then when you create the object of that class, you can call this method. Okay, so here we are going to take we will display the multiplication. So here we have times this. So we call the multiply. We call the multiply method. So here we have our multiply over here. Okay. So now we take the radius from the user. So we can tell the user to enter a radius of a circle. We copy here, we paste it here, we modify. So please enter a radius of a circle. Okay, so here our radius, we get it from the user. So radius, we get it from the user. Okay, so now we can print our results. So system dot out dot print length. Okay, so the circumference of a circle of radius. Okay, so we join our radius values. Then is, and then we call our radius circumference function on the mass object. So mass dot circumference. Okay, we takes in the radius value. So radius. Okay, so once we are done, we just end with our answer. Okay, so the circumference method is in the mass class, but we created objects of that class, so we can call the methods inside. Now we will do that for the square of a number. So that one too, we'll tell the user to enter. So the system, please enter a number to square. Okay, so here we have double, can call it number. Okay, so our display system dot out points. Okay, so we have the square of, then you add the number. So number, then we will call our square method. So we have mass plus square, and we pass in our number value. Okay. So that is it. Okay. So I want to zoom the code a little bit so you can see it. Then I explain it. I was explaining whilst I was typing, but I'm going to zoom it so I can explain. Okay. So here, in this example, in this package, we have a class called mathematics. So mathematics has a list of mathematics. It has a list of mathematics methods. Okay, so we have list of mathematics methods there. So the advantage of object-oriented programming is that you can create a class, then which is a blueprint. So it's a blueprint for any other objects that you create. So if you create any object, it will have that kind of characteristics. We call it inheritance. So if you create object of a class, it will inherit all the properties that the class has. So like the variable names and the methods. So you can call the methods on that object. So we have all this list of methods. Now if you call these methods in another class, you don't need a static qualification. So here you don't need the static, you just need the accesses, the access modifiers, whether public, whether private, whether protected. Then we need to specify the data type and the name of the method. Then if the method takes in something, you declare the variables it takes over here. Then you can use the variable. If it returns something, then what it returns should reflect the type of data you specify over here. Now, when you want to use these methods classes, you need to create objects of that class. In the class you want to create the object in. So in this example, we created an object for our mathematics class, which has all the methods that we need for our math lesson. So we created an object of it. Now we can call all the functions of the mathematics on this object by just writing the name of the object, then a full stop. So when you write the name of the object and a full stop, all the methods you've written in that class will show up. Then you can call it. So if a class takes in an argument, to make sure that you have the value that you need to call that function. So when you call that method, you pass in the appropriate value that you need to pass for that function. For example, the welcome one takes in a string value. So we declare a string variable, which is the value we are getting from the user. So once we get the value, we declare and put the value inside it. Then we call our welcome method, which is in the mass class, which we declare the object for it. Then we pass in that value. Okay. So in the fun one doesn't have any input. So when we call .fun, we have empty brackets because that method doesn't have any brackets. So once you call it and you save. Okay. Now these are all the methods we can call. We have the sum. So the sum takes two numbers. So we got these two numbers from the user, then we pass in. Now if you were using the result of the method, you need to declare a variable and store it inside. But we only need to display it, so we don't need to declare any variable for it. So we just call that method, then we do the calculation, then the result we are going to display it on our screen. So it's the same thing with this. We call apply method, which is in the math class, mathematics class. So you can call it on the math object. Then we also got the value from the user for the radius. Now once we got it, then we also display the circumference of the radius by calling our circumference method. Then we also have our square method. This takes in the square number of the number then squares. So when we call it over here, you can just call the square. So when I run this code, okay, so it says please enter your name. So Godwin Ashon. So Godwin Ashon, welcome to Mathematics for Beginners. Mathematics is fun. Please enter a number. So let's say 25. Okay, please enter another. So let's say 6.8. Okay, so it did the summation and did the multiplication 10 as well. Then it says please enter a radius of a circle. So for 4.5. Then the circumference of the radius of 5 is this. Then please enter a number to square. So if I want to find the square root of 5, then I just enter it. So the square of 5 is 25. Then we finish with the lesson. So that's it for a class. When you declare, you create your class. When you want to use it in the from other classes, you need to create objects of that class. So once you create the object of the class, you can call all the methods in that class by just writing the name of the object you've created, then dot. Then all the list of methods will show. Then you can call them. Okay, so now let's continue with Okay, so I'm going to explain this one because the code is similar, so I'm not going to create a code for that. I will explain you. You have the code sample, so you can run it yourself and understand it. So in this example, in our example that I code, I created a class for mathematics, but in this example, the class is employee. Okay, so we have to create the objects of the employee. You just write employee, the name of the objects. Most often we name the objects by lowercase of each class. So that's most often. So we know the object reflects what the class is about. So we have employee, and the object name is an employee with a small e is equal to new, then employee. This our employee doesn't take in any argument, any constructor, so you don't pass anything here. Now you can also as well declare the object name before you can initiate it or create the object of it. So to create the object of it, then you write the name of the object is equal to new, then the class name. Okay. So the new keyword creates the objects of that class. This is just declaring the class, just like we declare ints and declare other data. So this is just declaring. So you need to initialize it by creating the object. So you have new. So you need to, if you are using this method, then the name of the object is equal to the new, then the object name. If the object is in an input, you pass in the input over here. If not, the empty bracket. So most often the classes that we create will have attributes which are variables. So here we can have first name, string last name, string phone, string employee, string salary, and so on. We also have set methods. So the set methods are used to set values of variables on the memory. So if you want to set a value of some variables in your class, you can write a method called set that will set the values of that class on the memory. For example, if you have a variable called first name, so the value of the first name variable, I need to create a class set first name. And most of the setters method, we have the keyword set. We have the keyword set. You have the keyword set. You have the keyword set. Then you give it a name. So set, for example, set first name. So anybody that sees this one is setting the first name of value. So this is set last name. So here you pass in the value you want to set the lesson. Then the variable name you declare in the class will be here. So it's equal to, so with the value pass here will be assigned to this variable name that you declared. Okay, so here set last name. So the value you pass here will be assigned to the variable name you declared. And set phone. So the value you pass here assigned to the variable name you declare. Then employee ID. So the value you set here will be assigned to the variable name you declare here. Then salary. So the value you set here will be applied to your variable name. Okay. Now, if you decide to use the same variable name as on the argument for the set as the one you have on in your class, then you need to differentiate that of the class variable from the method argument by using the keyword this. So for example, if I decide to write public void set phone bracket string phone, then because this phone and the phone here is the same as the phone variable name, I have to qualify this one by writing this, then dot phone is equal to phone, just to separate, so that it separates that of the argument, the argument variable from the class variable. Okay, so as you can see, next example. So the next example, let's say for example we have first name. Okay, so here if we use in the set method, if we decide to use the same variable name, then we need to differentiate that of the class variable from the set variable by the class variable. So this refers to the of the class. Then this is the value you pass to the object when you create the class, so that it stores that value. Now we have the get methods to retrieve the values that you've set. So the get methods, the value is set, we use to retrieve them. So that one is just data type of the value you are returning. So you return the variables that you declared in the class. So for example, if I want to return the name I've set, since the name is stored in the memory by name, first name, I'll write a get method. So he said this variable name is a string, so I write public string, then get, then the name is first name, then the value I've set in that variable name. So last name, same thing. So for get, we don't have any argument because it doesn't take contains the values that we set using the set method. So if you set the values, then you get them by using the get methods. So that's the difference between get and set. Okay, so so you can create a new project. Then in the new project, you declare variables for the employee class. So we create a class called, so you declare variable for the employee class. You write set and get methods for that class. Then you create objects of the employee class in one class. Then you save your project. Then you call those objects the methods of the objects in the main class. So in this example, we will have in the employee class, these are the input for calling the employee values. So if you set maybe the name, first name, last name, phone number, the ID, and the salary. Now remember, we said we use a set method to set the values. Okay, now you can get the values using the get. So you can get the value. So you can have first name is equal to, so you can value we've set. So employee get first name. So you can get each of the values. Okay. So in actual production, you get these values from the user. Then instead of coding it, we pass the value the user has entered here. Then you can set those values. So anytime you want to get the value you called on the memory, then you call the methods to access those values. Okay. So now you can as well access a variable value by using the dot. So the object name and the dot will also access the variables that you declared in your class. So like the same way we access methods, we can also access the variables by using the object dot, the variable name. Okay, so far as you speak, based on if you access modifiers based on each type you are using and where you are accessing the value. If you want to access the name value, you can also as well access it using the object name dot, then the variable name. So example, in the get first name that we wrote, I can as well write employee first name, then I get the value by let's call the variable name. So I can have employee dot and the variable name. So which is stored in that variable name will be fetched and displayed. Okay. So now let's do the example. So the code is over there, but I'm going to put the project for you to understand. So you see it step by step how I'm doing it. So we have file, the new the Java project. Okay. So here I can call my project as work. Then I get the employee class inside. Okay. So here my project name can be work. So in the work, I can create a folder. I can call name. Right, no do info. So templates. So in our work, in the SRC, in our SRC, I can create a package I'm going to call, okay, so I can have main, package name, call main. Okay, so in this main, I will have my main class. So I'll have my class. So new class. Then main. Then I'll need the public static void main because that's where the code will run from. So I click it, then I click finish. Now another package I will call employee, where I will write the employee class. Okay. So I'm just showing you the right way of. And later on, if you know how to, then you can create a package called DB or database where you store all your database classes inside. So it makes it easier for you to access your classes, as well as if somebody else is reading your code, then the person can easily know where to navigate and get the value. So we have employee. So we have a package called employee. This employee package, I'm going to create a class inside. I'll call it employee. So new class. I'm going to name it. So we have this class doesn't need the public static because we are going to create object to that class in the public static void main. So we don't need. So I'll click finish. Okay. Now it says declare variables. Oh, okay. So it says declare variables for your first name and last name, everything about the employee that you want to have for that employee. So based on the code you are writing, the type of information you need and the variables you create for that class. So here I can have string. Okay, but because I want to be public, I have to qualify it with public string. So public string, I can have first name. So I can have first name, last name, phone, then as many as you want. So later on you can add more information. Okay, then maybe I'll add age. So public int age. Okay. Then I can also have public double salary. These are variables for that employee class, but these variables you need to store them on the memory so that anytime you need to have access to them, you can just call the necessary method to have access to it. Now to set, there are two ways you can set. We either use a constructor or we use set methods. Now we haven't gotten to the constructor yet, but I've explained the set and we get it by get method. So in the get method, we just write the set method is void because you don't return anything. But in the argument, the input that we use to set all these values of these variables is what we will have in our argument for the set methods. So let's say, for example, if you want to set our first name, we can have a method called public void set. Okay, so first name. Okay, then you have the string which will be the value you will use to set. Now there are two ways. If you decide, you can just use a different variable name from this one. So you can use a different variable name which is different from this one. So in that case, your set will just be, so in that case, since you are setting this one into this one, it's just going to be this variable name, which is first name, then is equal to, then the value you pass in the argument, which we are using it to set the value. So we have fn. Okay, so the value you pass here, it will be assigned to your variable name called first name. Now the second example, I will show you the this, how we use a this. So if you have public void set last name, okay, then if you use the same variable name called last name, so string last, okay, So string last name. So with this string last name, you can see that this last name, the variable names are the same, both the parameter and this one. So if you write last name is equal to last name, now how do you expect the listener to know which is which? So like I said, it has no effect because it's like you are assigning this value, same value. But if you want to refer to this particular one, because what comes at the left are this one, because you are putting what is at the right inside the left. So the what comes at the left ones are the variable names of the class. So you need to differentiate it. If you decide to use the same name as the variable, if you decide to use the same variable name as your class variables. So in this case, I need to qualify this by writing this, then dot, then the name of my variable name for the class. Now this is blue, so it means it's referring to this one. So this is referring to this one. So that this keyword differentiates the last name for this one and the last name for this, if you decide to use the same variable names. But if the variable names are different, you just have this is equal to this. So the variable name is equal to then the argument we pass over here. Then the next one, we have public set. So if I decide to use the same name, so if I decide to use phone, the same name, then that one too, I need to differentiate that of the class and the name by qualifying it with the this. So this to write this dot phone is equal to phone. Okay, so I differentiated it from this. Then that's of the age. So public void set age. Now remember our age is integer, so the parameter we use to set should also be integer. Int age. Okay. So since the same name, both the arguments and our class variable has the same name, I have to differentiate that of the class with the this. So this age is equal to age. Then you earn it. Then you move on to that of salary. So you have public void set salary. So we have double salary. Okay. Now since the names are the same, then I have to use the this keyword. So this salary is equal to salary. So now when we call this value, so if you are writing a practical application, you can ask the user to enter the first name. So once you've gotten the first name from the user, then you call the object name, then dot set first name. Then you pass in the string name, first name you've gotten from the user to it. So it will put in on the memory where we have the name first name. It will put up from the username. Now, if you ask the user to enter last name and you call the object name dot last name and you pass that value to this over here, that value will be assigned to the memory you've named last name in that class. Then for that of phone too, the phone value you get from the user, if you pass it here, it will be assigned to the memory space you've named phone for that class. And if with that of age, if you put it here, to assign to the memory space you name age. Then if you set salary, it's the same thing. The value you get from the user and you call the set salary function, you pass that value, it will be assigned to the memory space that you've named and salary. So that will be over there. So now if you want to get the value to display to the user, maybe you process it and you want to display to the user, then you need to also have a method called get, the get methods. So the get method returns all the values of your variables that you declare in the class. So I can have something like public string get first name. So the get method doesn't take any input. Okay, unless maybe you want to manipulate some things and it returns something, then you input there. But most getters don't have any input value, so you just return the variable name. So the variable name is first name, so you return it. So this will return the value stored on the memory by name first name. So you do that of last name. So public string get last name. Okay. So that one also returns last name. So return last name. Then we have that of phone. So public string phone get phone. So it will return the phone. Then we have that for age. So public int age get age. So it will return the age. So return age. So salary. So public double get salary. Okay. So return the salary. Okay. So that's it. So you can modify your code and add more information like the address and other information you want to have for that of the employee class. And this is what we will do to demonstrate, to teach you how to class and write a set methods and get method of that class, create objects of the class, access its methods, and the rest. So now we created our employee class, so you can create as many employee objects as we want. If we want to have 5 employee objects, we don't have to write a different code again. We will just use the same class by just creating different objects of that class. Then they will have all these methods that we've written. So in our main class, we are going to create objects class, then we set the values inside, then we later display the values we've set to it. So in our main, now I intentionally separated the package for both the employee and the main. Now remember that in this case, both classes are in different packages. So if you use a method, it's going to complain. So I'll show you in the case where you are using a class from a different package, how you can resolve it. It will suggest, it will give you the suggestion. So when the error comes, you just right click on the error, then it will give you a suggestion, a possible suggestion that you can use it to resolve your issue. So in this now we need to create the objects for our employee. So in our public static void main, where the main class is run, we create objects. So we have employee. We said the name of the class. So the name of the class is employee. Then the object name normally takes lowercase of your class. So employee. Okay, employee. So then it's equal to. Then we use a new keyword. So new. Then employee. Okay, our employee doesn't take any input, so we just finish it. Okay, then so we just finish it. Okay, now as you can see, we are getting an error here because it's not seeing that class because they are in different packages. You can see this one is in the employee class and our main class is in the main package. So if that happens, you have to click over here so that it imports that class. So it's a suggestion that you should import the class. So you can see import employee. So if you click on it, so it's employee dot the name of the class. So this is a package name. So that's a package dot the name of the class. So this will import the class. So you can create objects of that class. Okay. Now since we've created objects, now we can get values from the user. Then we set those values in our employee object, or we can directly set the values by when we get it, we set it automatically. So we need our scanner class to create object of that scanner class to get the values from the user. So like we've done, you need to import your scanner class too, so which is in java.util.scanner. Okay, so we import the class. So in this class, you need to create object of it. So we need to create object of it once you've imported it. So we have scanner in, I'm naming it in, is equal to new, some may also name it fine. So scanner. Okay, then our inner class takes in the input system dot in. Then we finish it. Okay. So this time let me scan. So this time I'll name our scanner as scan. Okay, so scan. Okay, so now I will set my first name. So first I have to tell the user what the input is supposed to enter. So system dot out dot print len. So we have please enter first name. Okay. Now you can declare a variable to store the first name and later on use it to set your first name for your employee. So you can have string first name is equal to scan dot get the next string next line, scan dot next line, scan dot next line. Okay, so now you can as well insert the value. So you can have employee dot set first name. Okay, so you want to set first name with our first name value. first name. Okay, so in the employee class, the variable name by first name, the value we get from the user, will set that on the memory where we name it first name variable. The value we get from the user, it will be recorded over there. So later on, if we want to get it and we call the get first name, that value will be returned to the lesson. We will return either display or whatever you want to use it for. Okay, now you can as well, instead of calling here, you can as well write it direct so that you can have this employee dot set first name, then you can have scan dot next line. So it will get this value, then it will use it to set it automatically. So for example, if I tell the user to enter last name. So last name. Okay. Now I can write employee dot set last name. Okay. Now I can call the scan because it takes in a string. I can call the scan dot next line on it directly. So wait for that. Once we get a value, then the value will pass into that argument we have over there. Okay, so like I told you, if you are calling a function that you are not going to use its value later on, you can directly call the function on wherever you are using it. So here, the scan dot next line will get the value from the user. Now that value is a string value, so it will be passed on to our set last name method. Then that value will be stored on the last name variable that we declared. So in the last memory where we have last name, last name, the value we get from the user will be stored over there. So you can either do it this way. Here we got it and we store it in our first name variable. Then later on we call that this method and we pass that value. Then we set the value for our first name. Okay, by here we just directly call this one to take the value from the user, which is a string. Then we set it at once. So you can write the code at once. They all do the same work. Okay. Now let's set the other one. So I can just copy and paste this, so I can just so that it will be faster. So here we ask the user to enter phone. So please enter phone. So phone. So here we have set phone. So here we set phone. Okay. Then after phone, what else? After phone, we set age. So please enter age. So age. So for age, it is int. So we need to call the method here because it's an integer value that we have to pass in the argument. We need to call next int. So we need to call next int so that it gets an integer value from the user. Then it passes it to our set age method. Then we have to the salary. So you can tell the user to enter salary. So please enter salary. Okay, so we have set salary. Now salary is also double, so our scan method, it should be next double so that it gets a double value because the set salary is expecting a double value, so we need to get a double value from the user. Then you set it. Okay, so now once we've set it, all those values we got from the user, we store them on the memory of the object, employee object, so we can display there is the what is in the memory by using the get calling the get methods. So now if we want to display what we've gotten from the user, so you can have system dot out dot println. Okay, so let's say employee information. Okay. So in this one, let's star in between it. So we put star in between it. I have okay. So in between employee information, the star will be at the top and the bottom. So now we display each of the values which are on the memory. So you have system dot out dot println. Okay, so the value in the first name variable for the employee. So we have first name. Okay, so we are going to get class. So we are going to get the value we stored on that in the memory. So if you call the get method of that, this is so get first name. Okay, so the get first name will return the value stored on the memory for our variable name, first name of that object. Okay, so this one will get the value stored on the memory for our variable name, first name. Then we can as well have that for last name, phone, age, salary. So last name, is equal to so we have get last name. How did I write? Small freezer. So how did I name it? Small n. Okay. So here is what? Age. So we have our age. So we have get age. Then we have that of after age. I think phone should come before him, so you learn right phone. Okay, so get phone. Okay, and salary. Okay, so if you are in Ghana, you can just write the currency. Okay, or GHS. Get salary. Okay, so that's it. Now, like I explained in your lecture notes, you can as well get the value by the variable name. So you call the objects. So for example, if the last name I want to get it by that way, I'll just call the objects and then dot, then the name of the variable. So here the variable name is last name. Okay, so based on the So if the access modifiers is public or private or whatever it is, the where you accessing it, whether it will give you error or not. I remember ours is public, so you can access it anywhere. But if you are using any other type, then wherever you are accessing it, it may give you error or not. So you just have to follow the rules. So now we save, then we run our main. So we run our main. So I run the main. Okay, so first we are setting the values. So first name Godwin, last name Ashon, phone +233 20 then 52045. So 6. Okay, so I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. Okay, so that's for 4. Then age, maybe 21 or 22. Then salary, let's say 2,500. Okay. Now, after that, we display the information. So the information we've stored on a mat object. So our first name was Godwin. Our last name was Ashon. Our age is 22. And the phone is plus this. And salary is this. Okay. Okay. So if we want our S to be separated from the 2, then we need to leave a space over here. So we can space over here. Okay. So you can also have another second object, employee. So in that case, we don't need to create a different class. It's the same, and just I will create a different object for it. So I can copy the whole of this code. Now I'll just change the first name. So here I can qualify it employee and first employee information. So first employee information. Now I create another object for a second employee. So here I'm going to give the object name a different object name. So maybe I'll just name it EMP. Okay, so I can just EMP. So here I'll just call it this. Okay. So here I've already declared my scanner object. I can use the same scanner object. Okay. Okay. So you can enter second employee first name. Okay, so let's do this and put it on the other one. So enter, so there it will be last name, then here phone, and here age, and here salary, and here salary. Okay. So I want to directly call it this type, and just only setting a value for it and store it before I put it inside. I want to directly call it and put value inside, so I can take off this one. Okay. So all this one will be our end object. All these ones will be end object. Objects, end objects. So here to end objects. Okay. So here second employee information. So second employee information. So here the object name is end. So end, 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 end. Okay, so the same class, we've created two objects from that class. So they all have the same code from that class, and we've called the same methods in the rest. So that's the advantage of using the class. You created a class, you can create as many objects as you want from that class. So now we will run this code. We'll take two employee values. So we have two employees. So a J, then last last name like this. We deleted the first one. Then phone plus 233 20 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Okay. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. So then we can have age. Maybe employee age can be 25. Then salary can be 1,800. Okay, so that's it for the first employee. We jump our first name value. We jump our first interaction. Then let's say 4. That's 2 3 3 2 4 1 2 3 4 5. Okay. So enter age can be 28. Salary can be 2,000. Okay, so it's keep our first name value, so that's why you don't have anything. So we can see that our second employee also have the values we've set for them. So wait for an object. You can create an object. You can create a class. Then you can create as many objects as you want. So you can create it as you want. You can create as many objects as you want. You are supposed to set the value. I don't know, maybe this thing was full, maybe that's why. But after please enter second employee first name, you're supposed to get the value before it comes to the second lesson. But that's okay. So that's the explanation. So if you've created a class, you can create out of that class by just the name of the class and the object's name, then then the new keyword, then the same class name. Now if the class takes in an argument which we call constructors, pass it here, but if not, then you don't have to pass anything here. Okay, so once you've done that, then you can call the methods that are available in the class. So in our employee class, we have these methods. So once you create the objects, you can call those methods. So we have the set methods for setting the values. Then we have the get methods for getting the values we've set. So all those ones, you can call them. So the set methods are used for setting all these variables that we've declared, their values. Get is for getting the values which are stored on the memory. So when you get them, then you can display it and use it the way you want it. Okay, so let's continue. today's lecture seems a little bit, so you can take it gradually within the week. Do it and you are a little bit tired, you pause video, then you can just continue it. So when my Chrome during the time I visit the site, I keep inactive for some time, and the page content. Okay, so whilst we are waiting for the page to load, so I summarize it so we complete. I don't have to go over again. So in class, create a class by going to your package. If you create a package, then you right click the package, then new, then class. So once you create the class, you can have class and have variables. So we call them data. So the data of the variable. So you list all the variables of them. These variables, you need to set them so that they can have values on the memory. So to set the values, we either use setters or we use constructorialize those values. So if you decide to use setters method, you pass in the value to set those class variables. So once you pass them, then you assign it. Now if the setter argument, the setter parameter has the same data name, the variable name, as that of the class you are setting, you need to differentiate the class variable name from the set method parameter by adding the this dot to the class variable name, so that you know that this is for the class and that is for the parameter argument value. Okay, so this is the employee example. So my code will be different from what we have in the lecture notes, because whilst I'm typing, I can expect certain things, so I have to be editing the code. But it is similar. So we have the first, the last name, employee ID. This one has employee ID, then phone and salary, the map page and the rest. So you can as well add any other details. Then the set get methods to names are different, but the naming the variable, it depends on you, the individual. Okay. Now this is the main, how we call them in the main. So we call them and we get the values. In this example, the get values are stored in the memory first before displaying them. So we get all these values which are stored on the memory for display. Now we have introduction to constructors. So in this same example, we are going to change the way we set the value. This time we are going to use constructors. So constructors are used to force when the objects are being created. If they need some information, then when the objects are being created, those informations need to be passed to that object. So if you want to set the values using the constructors, then you can create a constructor for that. But if you don't want to, you want to use the set methods too, then you can leave it that way. So this is how we create constructors. So automatically supply default automatically if you don't create any constructor. So by default, if you don't create constructors for your class, it's being declared for you. So and these default values are set. So fields that are objects themselves. So we have numeric fields are set to 0, character fields are set to this Unicode, and Boolean fields are set to false. And fields that are objects themselves, as for example, string fields are set to now. Okay, so if you don't set constructors to initialize all your variables and those things, they are set automatically for you. But if you want to set them when you create it, then you need a constructor. So for example, if you are creating a window, when we come to GUI, graphical user interface, then if you want to set the window height and width, when the object for that is the window, you want to set it, then you can create a constructor to give the dimension of the width and the height of your window. So when the window object is being created, then you have to pass in the dimension for the width and the height. Then the window will be displayed. Okay. So in the next example, we'll be creating a constructor to set our data, our variables in the class. So a constructor has the same name as the class. So you have the same name as a class. So you have public, then you have your class name. Okay, so the same name as a class. So if your class is mathematics, then your constructor will be public mathematics. If your class is employee, your constructor is going to public employee. If your class is people, then your constructor. So the name of the class is the same as the name of the constructor. So just write public, then the name of your constructor. Okay. Then in this argument is a data type that you want to be passed when the object is being created. So all your data types that you want to be passed when the object is being created, you declare them over here. Then you use those data types to set your variables, of the class, or based on what you want to use them for. But the key thing is that if you have a constructor, once the object is being created, it will be expecting that the values for the constructors will be passed when it's being created. Okay, so we will modify our employee example, and this time we will create a constructor to take the first name, the last name, the phone, and the rest. So we will not use any set method this time, even though we can still have the methods over there. So in our employee class, we create a constructor for it. So to create a constructor, like we said, we have, okay, it's the same name as a class. So our class is employee. So you have employee. Then you have your bracket. Okay, then you have your bracket. Then you list all your variable. So you leave all your variable data types that you want to be passed when the object is created. So when the object is created, all the variable data type that you want, okay, you put them here. So if you have this default, then this one doesn't take any input. Okay, but if you want to take an input for that constructor, you just have to write them here. So here we want to pass first name, so string first name. Okay, so string last name, string phone, int age. Okay, so then we have, okay, I've already given that. Okay, we can set our values. So you can set our values using the same disk, because the names are the same. Our constructor parameters are the same as our variable names. So we need to differentiate this one from this in the disk keyword. So we have this dot first name is equal to then first name. Okay, so the value we pass in our constructor will be assigned to our first name variable. So on the memory where we have our first name variable, the value will be stored over there. Then you come to this dot last name is equal to last name, phone is equal to phone, and this dot int is equal to I said dot int, dot age. This dot age is equal to age. Then this dot salary is equal to salary. Okay, so this dot salary. Okay, so this dot salary. Okay, so once we create our employee object, we need to pass in these values. So once we pass in, so we pass in a string which is the first name of the employee, we pass in a string which is the last name of the employee, we pass in a string which is the phone of the employee, we pass in an int value which is the employee, and we pass in the double value which is the salary of the employee when we are creating our object. So in this case, if you are getting this information from the user, we need to get information from the user first before we create this object, because it's a must we pass in those values. So in this case, we need to get the values from the user before we create the object, because when we are expecting us to pass in those values before it creates an object, if the object has a constructor, then we need to pass in those things. So when we save this, so in the situation where after setting these values, we want to override certain values we've set using the constructor, we can still use method. So if you set some, if you call the constructor the values you've had in the memory, if you want to rechange it, you can also call the set method, which will override the previous value you've set using the constructor, because the value you pass here will be assigned to it will replace the old ones which was set using the constructor. Okay, now since we've added the constructor to our class, when we declare it, we'll be expecting that it should pass in those constructor values. So if you put your hand on the let's see, it says the constructor employee is undefined. Okay, because expecting a constructor for that employee with certain values that it requires. Okay, so in this example, we need to get all values from the user before we create this object. So we can first of all create string. So we can have string first name. So we can create our scanner objects first, then we tell the user to enter the value, then we get the value, we assign it to a value. So we get all our values that we will need for our object. Okay, so here please enter your first name. So we have first name, which we can call fn or however you call it. It's equal to scan dot get page. I said get scan dot next line. Scan dot next line. Next. Okay. Machine is slow because of video and recording. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to copy these ones, then we do it for the other variables. So we have last name, we have a phone, we have age, then we have salary. Okay, so enter. Okay, so here let's enter employee first name. So employee last name. Or surname. So the employee employee salary. Okay, so here call it talent. Then you can call this one age, but I suppose you int. So int age. So it's supposed to be next int. Okay, and the next is salary, so it's supposed to be double. So it's supposed to be double. Double salary. Salary. And since it's double, next double, I'm going to delete up to this side. Okay. Okay, now we've gotten all the values that we'll need from the user. We've gotten the first name, the last name, the phone number, the age, and the salary. So when you are passing the value, remember the order of your constructor. Now if it's of the same data type and you switch the value, then once you are getting maybe first name, if you put the first because check the order of your constructor. Your first name came first before your last name, before your phone. So if you go, when you are creating the object, if you pass in the phone here, the phone is going to be set, the phone value is going to be set at the place of your first name. Now it will work because they are of the same data type. So far it is entered, it's going to work. So be careful when you are entering the value for your constructors. It is of the same data type. When you switch the value, you don't get any error unless maybe there is a for example, if instead of age, because age is int, if you go and put in the phone there, it's going to complain because at the value 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth input value, it's be expecting int. So if you put a string there, it will complain. Then let's say with the double, put maybe int or string, it will complain. But with these ones, you can see they are all string. So if you switch any value, it's going to still work because they have the same data type. So when you are passing your value, check the order of your constructor input and that you may switch their value. So our first one was our first name, our second one was our last name, the third was phone, and the fourth was age, and the fifth was salary. Okay, so now you see that when we pass in all our constructor values, the error has vanished. So when the value we get from the user, it will be used to set the first name variable. The same thing with the last name, to use to set the last name variable. And the same thing with phone, it will be used to set the phone variable. And the same thing with the age, it will be used to set the age value. Then the same thing with the salary, it will be used to set the salary. Now if you want to change any of the value, you can call the set method to change any of the values. So I can do one example. After we run this code, then I can modify it. So now let's copy. So we delete our second employee example, so it will be easy instead of typing again. So before we need to first of all get their value, so we can just copy. Can just copy from here up to here. Okay, so from the user, before we create the object, so we can have this. Now, because we've declared the variable, our fn, our ln, and the rest, we've declared them already, we can take them off because we've declared those variable names already. So if you are declaring it again, it will give you the error. So this time we already declared them, so you remove the second declaration. We just use them because we've already declared them. Okay, so the same with this one. Okay, now once we've gotten our value, we can use it to create our second value. So here we will still have our first name, last name, phone, age, and salary. Okay, now like I told you, if you put a string value here, it's going to contain. If you put, let's say, phone here, because in that processing a particular data type, in that position is a particular data type. So like you can see, when you put your mouse on it, it will tell you mismatch. So multiple markers at this line. The constructor employee is undefined. So the constructor, it needs to be, you are writing string instead of string int, because you switch the value. So here you need to have the same order of your distance, so you need to have int here over here. Okay, so once you've created your second employee, you can also display its information over here. So I'm going to run this, then I'll reset a value calling one of the set methods. So I'll reset a value out. We'll reset it to change the previous set value, but let's first of all run this one. So we just run this code. Okay, so please enter first name. So let's say Godwin, last name, Ashon. So let's go to 0. Okay, then age 29, then salary 2,500. Okay, so that information. So first employee for everyone. So that's the first name, last name, age, phone, salary. Okay. Why is this skipping this thing? Skipping the values. So it skip first name. So let's go on to second name. So we have last name, maybe photo, then phone, so 24, then salary 1,500. Okay. Oh, agent. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, so that's it. So age, I entered the wrong thing. Then it skipped the first name. I don't know why it's doing that, but it's not supposed to. So first name, we got, why did this skip? So we got this one. And when it displayed, why did it dump this part of the code? Next one. And it came here and there. I have no idea why this is going to. In the previous one to the second one, it skip it. Anyway, so that's it. How you create the objects and you use them. So you can use the constructor to set. You can use the constructor to set the value. So for example, if I want to set reset a value, if I want to reset a value, I can call the second employee, second lesson here. I can set a value, maybe the age, and I can display it again. So employee.set. So I can set the age. So it will be different from what the user will enter. So let's say age, let's say 17. So the first one we use to create the object, it will override that one. So I need to set it before. So I set it over here. Then I display it value. Then I can display it value. So I can display it value here. Okay, so you see that if the user enters 20, this time it will display 20. Now because I call the set, it will override the 20 and it will display the 17 this time, because the 17 will override the previous one that we got from, and we used to initialize it by the constructor. So if I run this one, for a strange reason my code is skipping the scan after the first one. So I don't know why, but the code seems neat because it's worked fine over here, except when we get to the second time it worked over here. So I don't know why when we call the second object it's full. So here it works according to the way it's supposed to work. So I don't know why, but we try to figure it out. If anything, let me know. But probably it may be my slow machine. So we have, I run the code again, then we'll see this part of the code where I override the age value by setting the value. Then that will be the last. So we moved on to the last session by explaining to you the code for the access modifiers. So we set out the public and the rest, and we call it a day for the week. Okay, so please enter first name. So let's say Godwin Ashon. Then enter employee phone. So 020 000 000. Then enter employee age. Maybe it's not intended. Employee salary, maybe 2,000. Okay. It's still skipping the first one. What could be the first? Okay. So enter last employee name. So let's say Kobo or Kobo. Okay. Then employee phone 024. Then age 23, then salary 1,800. Okay, so as you can see, the previous, the one in the constructor, it was 23. Now when I call the set method, it resets a different value, which is the 17. So it's now displaying the 17. Okay, so even if you are using a constructor to initialize a variable, you can still have the set method to override certain values that you want to use. For example, in the game that we talk about, when the game starts, you may have to set some values, because if you want the first three or the first ball to be always starting from this side, then you can initially, when you call that method, if you can write maybe the ball method to have the constructor of your x and y coordinates. So that one, when the first time it is being called, it will be passed. Then you can call the set method to be updating its position. So you can generate a random, so it will be updating, moving here or moving there in the order. So then you want it. So I still have your set in the as well as using the cutter to set your variables in your class as well. So at times, if you want to override certain ones, you still need your set method to override the values you have in that variable name you have right there. So I think that is that. So where is our second? So second employee have system.out.println get salary. So we enter this one. So why did it skip this part of the code? It didn't take the value from the user. It's strange. Then it's automatically move over here. Okay, so let's add it twice and let's see. So let me add it another second time. And let's see if it will skip all the two. Because it's skipping that line of code, which I'm not getting why it's doing so. So I'll write that. So if it skips the first one, then let's hope it doesn't skip the second one. So let me run it and let's see how it goes. So first name can be David, class name AJ, phone 024, age 24, salary 1,500. Did you skip it? Okay, so this time it worked. So it's expecting us to, so when it skipped the first one, now it's waiting us to enter the second one. But why did it skip this line of code? That's what I'm doing. Anyway, maybe my memory is full or something, but it's strange. It's supposed not to skip it. So now it skipped the first, this part of code, then it moved over here. So now we can enter our first name. So first name, let's say Mary. Then the last name can be, let's say, maybe Bokete. Then employee phone number can be 027. Okay. And employee age can be, let's say, 30. Then the salary can be 3,000. So 3,000. Okay. So we have first name Mary, last name Bokete, age 30. Now because we call another set method, it will override our page value, which is a 30. So it's now displaying 17. Then we have our phone, then we have our salary. Okay, so that's the classes. So you can create, when you create a class, you can create methods which you can create as many objects as you want from that class. So the create object is just the class name, then the object name, then equal to, then new, then the class name. Now it's a class as constructor. So we will talk about the constructor. Most often the constructors are used to set certain values. The constructor, when you are creating the object, you need to pass in the expected values of those constructors and the variable data type in the same order where it is. Now you should also check the order of the values. If they have same data type and you switch the values, it will still work. So for your own demonstration, where you have the first name, put a last name there and put the first name and the last name. Then when you are displaying the value, you see that when it says first name, it's going to display the last name because you switch the order of the variable values. Okay, but if they have different data type and you switch, it will give you a complaint because you're expecting a particular data type at that position. Okay, so now we said constructors. To create a constructor, it should supposed to be the same name as your class. Just like write public and the same name as your class, then you have constructor. If you are using a constructor to set values, just like the way we saw in the previous example, you separate the variable names from the constructor variable names. I qualifying this So this dot will differentiate these variable names from your argument for your constructor. Okay, so that's it. So add more functions to your employee, different informations you want to get from the employee. What is fun with this Chrome? If I leave that page, then everything is nowadays. Technology is making things so refresh. So I'll be going over orally whilst we wait for the page to load. Okay, so today objects, methods, classes, and the asset and modifiers. And the last session is going to explain the access modifiers with the examples. I already have them on my machine, so I'm not going to code them. But in your slide, I have the sample as well. Create the objects and be adding those codes so you can save as well. Okay, but this I'm going to just explain why, show the code to you, and show the access modifiers in access and why error is coming from. So you know, private, they can be accessed everywhere. So you notice that private for public, they can be accessed everywhere. So you notice that the package, I never get any error because it's having to access it in wherever I access it. And for private and protected and ones, it's error. And the explanation of the error I'm getting also, it's also display it for me, see the type of error I'm getting. Okay, so I have the code loading and I explain it over here. So on the code example, so on the page, I'll list the package, I'll write the package name. So when you create the project, you click on the SRC, then you name the package name. So you can give it the same package name so that in your subsequent code, since it will be using import, it will use the package name. So if you change package name in your subsequent code, you're invalid, so you get error. So you can use the same package name so that you can have the same code in it. So in default code, we have these classes. We have default example class. So in the default example class, the variables we didn't use a qualifier. So we didn't specify whether they are protected, whether they are okay. So they are automatically default. So they will be viewed as default. And it was said that default values can only be accessed in that package. Okay, so we have FN and LM. So in the FN and the LM, I can access anywhere, any code in the package. Outside the package, I'm going to get an error. Okay, so in this main, when I created the object, I'm saying apply FN values and the methods and those and the methods over there, I didn't get any error because they are in the same package. But I'll show you when we go to the main package, the errors that is migrating from it. So in this default example class, it's in the same package. This is in this same package. So this class and this class, they are in the same package. So we're calling the get FN, which I didn't qualify whether public or private or protected. It's allowed me to call it because they are in the same package. Okay, so in different package where I have it in my main. So in my main class, the object, that's one. Okay, so let me comment the ones I have here. Okay, so where we have the default example, so we have default example. This is the object for the default class. You see that when I was calling the set FN, I didn't specify the modifier whether it's supposed to be public or private, or so it's take default, and it said default methods or default variable will only be accessed within the same package. One is package than the default example class. So when you send it over here, it says that it's not visible. So if you're on the error, it says that the method set fn from the type default example class is not visible. So that method is not visible because we declare it at default because we didn't put any default, and default method variable will only be accessed inside their package. So this variable we are accessing it, we are getting error because they are in two different packages. That's why we are getting the error. We didn't get any error because same package. But in this different package we got an error. So that's it for the default example. Why is this just now to scroll? So I continue from okay, it came. So let me have a set explanation again. Okay, so we are the last part, and I think it's advice you take it gradually. So you take it maybe 1 hour and you get tired and go and relax, then you can come back and again. It's not from where you ended. So you have with the task. You can hit it. If you have you can do it the full 3. However you should do it, it's up to you. Okay. So like I said, I explained the default. So default you can only have it in the same package. Outside packages should not be anything default. And default is the one that you don't specify whether it is private, public, or protected. If you don't specify, it's default. So that one you only access it within the package. For private, you can only access it in the class. That one to see an example. So in the same package, you still not be able to access it. And outside the class package and the task, you still not be able to access it. Okay, so to demonstrate that, I've given the code I'm using to explain to you so that you can also use the same code to demonstrate at home so that you understand. So if you are saying public, most often you should declare your variables and your methods are public so that they can be accessed, unless you want to protect it or encapsulate it before you use either protected or private, based on where you want it to be accessed. If you want it to really access within the class and any other class that call you, they cannot have access it. You name it for private. If you want it to be accessed within the package, any other package should not be to access it. Then you name it. Then you leave it. So you don't call it. You use the default one. But if you want the subclasses to have the variable, then you call it protected. So that any other class which is from object that is being created from that class, you can still have access to those variables and methods. Okay, so in here I explained to you. So this is the code I was explaining, and you can see the errors I'm getting which are the not visible. So when you create your project, so you create a new project. When you create it, you create a package. You call it default example. In that package, you create the following classes. So you have default example class, and that is you should paste in that class. Then you have a main also class where you put in this code in that class. Okay. Now if you use a different package, remember that where I have the default example, it should be your package name. Where I have the default example, it's supposed to be package name. So you also have another package called main. So in the main package, you have the following classes. Okay. So we've talked about the default package already. So default example package. So in that package, you create a class called default example class. Then you copy this code inside. Then you have this main class. Then you copy the main class inside. Then we have a package called main. So this main package. The package are normally supposed to be in small letters. So this main is supposed to be small. The M is supposed to be small m. Then in the main package, we have the main class. So that one we only have one class which create objects of the other classes. Then you see the errors it gives you. Then we also have another package called private example. So that's for the package. And then that one we have these classes. So you have a class called private example class. So in that class you have this code inside which creates objects. So we have the methods of that class, then we create objects of that class in the main class. Then we have another package called protected example. In that package we have these classes, protected example class, and you put this code inside. Then you have the main class, then you also put this code inside. Then we have another package, public example. Then the public example class, you put this code inside. Then that one also has a main. And you also put that example inside. Okay. So once you have done that, you see that if you hover where you have the errors, you get something like this. The field private example class dot fn is not visible. So all the errors you'll be getting will be not visible errors because of the access modifiers that we have. Okay. So in this example, for example, in the default one that we briefly talk about it, in the main example, when we were calling some of the values from the default error, okay, they are on the default. Okay, so this default one. Now when we are calling this method, for default it's supposed to be only accessed within the package. Now this is a different package. Then we have default example package, we have main, and this class is in this package, so they are in different packages. So when we are calling this method on that object, we are getting that error because it is default, and default methods and variables we said they can only be accessed within the same package. So that's why we are getting this error. Now we take the example of the private example. We said private example can only be accessed in the class. So the variables or methods you declare them as you can only access them in the class. So here we say private string fn and ln. So these variable names you can only access them in this class. And this one too, private string get ln is a private, so we can only access it within the class. Now outside the class, within the same package, we won't be able to access it. So if you look at this example where we have, okay, so where we have our main, now we were at this one is private. So when we were accessing it, you see that it's giving us the error not visible, okay, because it is a private method. So for private method, you can't access it outside another class. So even though they are in the same, the main is also in the same package as the private example class. Because this method is declared as private, you can't use it outside our class. Only declarate that property. So for example, here in the protected example, when we call our variable fn to be protected, and the method also protected, we were able to call it in the main. Unlike the private that we were not able to call it, we were able to call it in the main because they are in the same package. Okay, so that is it. So we are able to call it in the same main. Now, when we go to the example, we have protected example in the main package. We are okay. So in the example protected, okay. So in the protected example, you see that we are getting the errors because they are of different package. Okay, so they are different package. Now, if you create a subclass where the class inherits, now later we'll come to extending a previous class. So if you extend a class, then you still have access to those things. But in a different class, the protected, you still get the errors. Where you can see that it's still complaining about these errors, and this the FN is protected, so we can't have access to it. Now for the public, as that one we didn't get any error because they are public. We can use them anywhere in our code, so we didn't have any error. Okay, that's it. In most programming, there we declare our variables as public and we declare our methods as public, unless in your special case you want to protect the variables or the methods. Then that one you qualify them with either private or protected. But remember, if you don't qualify your variables with a public, if you're accessing it somewhere, you get an error. It will use a default modifier, which says that you can only access the variables or the method in that package. So if you are calling it in another package, you get an error. Okay, so that's where we end our class today. So what did we learn today? We learned that we have method. Method is like a function. The difference between a method and a function is that a method is a function in a class. So once you declare a function in a class, it is referred to as a method. Now, you need to qualify the method so that it controls how the methods and the variables can be accessed in or outside the class or outside the package. So we have the access modifiers, we have the private, we have the public, we have the protected. Now, if you don't state any of these, then it's going to be default. And for default, it means you can't have access to that variable name or that method outside that package. So if you are accessing it outside another package, you are going to get an error because you say the default says that it should be only within that package. Now for protected, you can access it in the class, you can access it in the same package, you can also access it outside the package on condition that it is a subclass. So a subclass is when you create a class and you inherit that of the parent class. Then in that one too, you can still have access to the protected variables. But other than that, you can only use it in the class and also within the package. Then we have the public. For public is free agent, so you can use it anywhere. Now we said the advantage of using a class is that you can create objects of the class as many objects as you want. So in most games, we only create one class, then we create objects of the class. For example, if we have a game for a stone or a game where you need to user have to use the paddle, use the arrow keys to moving the paddle, and we have to escape from either gun or shooting or stones or whatever it is. Now those many objects you see, we don't have to create code for each of the objects. We only need one class. Then you can create objects, as many objects as you want from that class. So you can create as many objects as you want from that class. So once if you need thousands of that object, you only want to have one class, then you can create objects of that class. Most often if it's many objects, later on we'll come to a topic called array. So we can create an array of that object. So that array will have all the many objects that you have. So later on you can be setting the value using the set methods that we talk about it. So if you want to change the positions of your ball, you just use the set x to change the position of the x value. Then set y will set the position of the y coordinate and the rest. So basically that's what we use normally the games for. And in other programming, objects will become very handy. So you also need to master it. If you are doing mobile applications too, if you get information from the server, you have to store them if the informations are different values of for different people, you have to save all of them in an object which you create. For example, if I'm writing a mobile application where it will list a list of employees, then I need to create a class called employee. So when I get the list of employees from the server side,
Then I can create objects of that employee class. So I can have all the lists that I get from the server. I can create objects of them with the same informations that the class has. So I just call the appropriate set method to set the value. Then I call the appropriate get method to get the values that I have set. Okay, so that's it for creating the class and the methods. So in our subsequent examples, when I say create an object, please, you know how to create the object. It's just a class name, then you, the programmer, you give the object a name, then equal to, then new, then the name of the class. Then if the class has a constructor, you pass in the appropriate information or appropriate variable values that the constructor demands. Other than that, you just end it with a curly bracket. Now we said the constructors, we normally use the same name as a class. So we have public, then the same name as a class. Now if the constructor will take in the value, then you declare the variable data type for the parameters. Then when you are also creating the object which has a constructor, make sure the value you pass are in order, because if you switch a value which is of the same data type, then it will set the wrong values on the memory. So when you are fetching the value, you'll be fetching the wrong values because you switch their position. But if they have different data type and you switch, you get error. So that one you even be aware that there is something wrong. But if they have the same data type and you switch the order, for example, if my first order is string first name, my second is string last name, and I'm setting the value, and I'm going to put last name in the first name, and I'm going to put the first name in the last name. Now, in the memory, at the position where I have my last name, it will have the value of my first name. And at the position where I have my first name, it will have the value of my last name. So if I'm displaying the content, it will not tally. But if I say first name, then it will show my last name rather. If I say last name, then it will show my first name rather. So you should make sure that when you are creating the objects and you are passing a constructor value, they are in the order of the input where they are supposed to be. Okay, so that is it for today. Now you know how to contact me. If you have any programming error that you want to share, just take a screenshot of your error. Now, if you go to the home page of the course, there is chat with an instructor. So in the chat with an instructor, just send me a message with the image and the explanation of the error you are getting, so I can go through it and see, I can figure out the example that in the chat box. There is also the possibility, we have a feature we call uh, uh, programming assistance, where you can post your programming code for the error to be figured out for you as well. Then in the chat box, if you are chatting directly to me too, there is an attachment. You can also attach a file, so I can figure out also where you are getting the error. Then I can reply you and give you the message of where the error might be coming from. Okay, so that is the end for today, and enjoy the rest of the day. And remember to subscribe on the YouTube, and have a lovely day. Bye.